This is a classic because it explores African American and Black community in a beautiful way.
This play is a classic because it uses lush poetry, choreography, imagery, dance, and music to tell stories that are at once intimate and expansive.
Ooh,
Ooh!
no, that was beautiful.
This is our history. This is our legacy.
Hello and welcome to This is a Classic, the Expand the Canon Theater podcast. We're your hosts.
Skye Pagon, she, her pronouns, curator for Expand the Canon.
And me, Shannon Corenthin, she, her pronouns, also a curator for Expand the Canon.
Expand the Canon is a program of Hedgepig Ensemble, a Brooklyn-based theater company that reimagines the classics, creating a legacy of storytelling with gender equity at its core.
Today, we'll be talking about Ntozake Shange's Spell Number 7 from the Expand the Canon list, available at expandthecanon.com. If you were to go to that site, Skye, and you should, you would find this pitch.
If you are looking for an ensemble-led choreopoem that explores the Black experience in the entertainment industry, consider Spell Number 7 by celebrated playwright Ntozake Shange. Set in the late 1970s in St. Louis, Missouri, the play welcomes us into a world not too far from our own, forcing us to reckon with the realities of the isms in creative spaces. The play takes us through the lives of 9 characters who are fighting to discover themselves as artists in a society that sees them as one-dimensional afterthoughts. Using a mixture of lush poetry and stylized choreography, and guided by a literal magician, the ensemble explores the effects of blackface and violence against Black women in the entertainment industry and beyond.
What a strong pitch.
I know, really packs a punch in that pitch and packs a punch in the play.
Truly.
Legacy.
I mean, the pitch pretty much explains what the play is. The play is a choreopoem that doesn't follow a linear timeline. It's not linear storytelling. It's very imagery based and movement based, and focuses very much on the stories it's telling. But I think some important things to note from the plot is that it starts with a kind of conversation about minstrelsy. There's a lot of masks, there's a lot of blackface, all on Black bodies that start this choreopoem, this performance, really launching the audience and propelling them into this world that we're entering. You immediately kind of get a sense of the world that you're coming into. And then you hear the stories of the different actors that are on stage. And each of the women, I would say, have kind of a monologue talking about their experience that is truly beautiful and real and feels accurate to this day, to the experience of Black women in theater and in the industry and in the world.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that's so lovely about this play is she sort of sets it all up. There's this sort of, I guess, kind of framing device of this magician that has this sort of like conjuring aspect of, we are conjuring these characters, we are conjuring these theatrical devices at the top, and then there's sort of a closing ritual at the end that sort of frames the whole play in a lovely way and sort of allows us to then like have that suspension of disbelief to be able to go on this sort of meta theatrical journey with these characters. And they're all working in the entertainment industry in some aspect or another at various stages of their careers and with various perspectives on the arts. And I guess like the most literal version of this is like, hey, a bunch, like 9 people are kind of hanging out in a bar and talking about their experience. But it's the literality of it is a pretty short-sighted way to describe this play, because it sort of transcends time.
I think that's what sets this plot and this play apart from the rest of the plays on our list, and any play that we've ever had on our list, really, is that this is very much an experience. I feel like we have a lot of plays that just follow the model of what a play is, the timeline, the devices, but
5-act structure.
Exactly. This is not that. Feels like if you were to meet up with your friends in a bar and then, you know, one person launches into their story and all of that good stuff. So, but that's also why we can't, there's not much more that we can delve into without revealing the beauty of the language and the beauty of what they talk about. I think there's a lot of things that just need to be discovered during either the performance of it or the reading of this play.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It's funny, like right before the mics went on, we were like, what are we going to say about the plot of this play? Because it doesn't really, the plot isn't the important thing in this play. And the plot is sort of like we said, sort of secondary to the experience of these characters and the language that Shange uses to describe those experiences.
Exactly.
In sort of talking about like the wider context for this play and why it's on the list, I think we were getting at a lot of that, of just, for me, the first thing that struck me about the play is just the language.
Yeah.
Because it's so beautiful. I mean, if anybody who has read or seen a Shange play knows, like her poetry, the way she writes is so lush and beautiful. Gorgeous. And also another thing that struck me, I have to say, in rereading this play, is like, it's funny. It is a funny play also.
Yes. There's a lot of humor that balances out the kind of serious topics that we're discussing within this play, and that's life.
Yeah, I think that's something that I really enjoyed more in this reading as well, is it also, because that sort of plays into the community feel that you were getting at, of like, it feels like 9 people talking in a bar about what they're struggling with. But the sort of humor of that also helps in the sense of like, these people are at times complaining about their lives, and at times they're commiserating, and at times they're really taking powerful stands, and at times they're like making fun of stuff, which feels very true to life and also is like a really beautiful way, given like what they're talking about, of sort of like taking ownership of those spaces and taking some power back, of like, we're going to make fun of the way that we are being treated by the casting industry. We're going to poke fun at it and take the power back a little bit that way.
I support everything that Skye has just said.
End of podcast.
And end of podcast. We're done. What I would really like to touch on, because we talked about how different this play is from the rest of this list from 2020 and beyond, I think there's a few plays that do this too, but just the interdisciplinary nature of this play, right? We have projections, we have music, we have dance, and also we have performance and acting, and just the kind of importance of all of those to the play and to the text that we're talking about. Yeah, and just kind of have a deeper conversation about that and why that influenced our choices.
Yeah, I mean, I think it creates this like really holistic piece that is so complex. Zooming out a little bit, like structurally, like we said, the sort of framing device is there's the magician character who has this, I guess, sort of like conjuring feel to the top of the play of like setting where we are, and then it like nominally it's 9 characters taking place in a bar, sort of talking about their experiences in the entertainment industry and navigating racism and sexism and all many other kinds of issues in those spaces. And in order to do that, like sometimes they're sort of literally talking about stuff, and then sometimes they are telling stories that are sort of metaphors for what they're going through, and sometimes they just break into dance, and sometimes there's like a one bit where there's a group dance that sort of goes through all these different styles of dance, like over history, basically, in a really beautiful way. And so it's sort of very much, like Shannon said, sort of weaving in and out of all these different kinds of storytelling to sort of reflect the inner struggles and emotional life of these characters in like very, very different ways.
Yeah, and I think listening to your commentary and going through that part about them going through the different styles of dance throughout history and the nature of this performance feels also like not a commentary, but a kind of look through and how African American and Black culture in America is, of, you know, this is how we meet, this is how we show up for each other in a community, is there's music, there's dance, there is storytelling, and that feels very true to the Black experience, not only in America but also everywhere, of just like there's a big reliance on community and how we share our stories, which I think is a really beautiful thing that she does here, is like, it does feel like in a, artistically, obviously it's a performance, but she kind of doesn't elevate it, because I think that those community moments are inherently elevated because they're so beautiful and filled with love, but like frames it in a way that you can see kind of the intricacies and the artistry of it in this space. Yeah.
It's also a really beautiful foil because the crux of what they're dealing with is the experience of being rejected or fetishized by like this very traditionally white Western performance tradition of like, a lot of these are like Black women in the theater talking about being typecast, being overlooked, being abused. And so then to like have the juxtaposition of talking about those negative experiences and then to contrast that, have these like beautifully celebratory moments that are like really expressions of traditional Black performance traditions and African American performance traditions, and like to sort of showcase the inherent power and beauty in those traditions as a foil to the sort of negative sides of like traditional classical theater and traditional like popular Western theater, is just like a really beautiful juxtaposition. Like celebrate that community and that inherent artistic worth in those art forms, but also then to be like, there's kind of like a FU in that as well.
Yeah.
That is really wonderful.
Yeah, agreed. And it kind of is in conversation with our other plays on this list. What you just said just sparked. For me, it's like, yeah, this play does also put in check the other plays that we've put on the list. And, I mean, that's the kind of work that we do here at Expand the Canon, is try to make sure that everyone's included in a conversation. But having this play is kind of an awareness of the biases and the work that is inherently difficult because of just the history of theater and the history of Western theater, which I just thought was really interesting, especially when we were discussing about having this play on the list. And none of us said no, of just like, how this play fits within the greater landscape of the work that we do. It was just a very exciting moment to include this for all of those reasons, the difference in format, topic.
Yeah, and like you said, even in the best of classical plays, there's still, I mean, I think all of us have had this experience of working on a piece of, quote unquote, great literature or like a really great play. And even plays that like I love, that we love, that people continue to celebrate for good reasons, there's still moments where the language feels outdated, or there's things that you want to update or contextualize for a modern audience because, the world has changed.
Yeah.
And it's really beautiful to have, like you said, this play sort of contrasting with all those other plays on our list. As much as we love them and celebrate them, like a play that is written in the 16th century is going to need some contextualization or some cuts or something. And so having this play sort of, like you said, like the meta theatricality of like having it live in conversation with the other plays on our lists is a really nice reminder for us working on this list, and also like hopefully, people who are encountering this list holistically.
No, for sure. I think if our list always looked the same year to year, I don't know that the work that we'd be doing was as effective as we wanted it to be. And the fact that we are doing the work to really make sure that all classic texts, or that, I mean, this is very not biased, but it's subjective, right? Because it's us, it's 5 people reading and then choosing, but that we're including pieces that wouldn't traditionally be included in what we think is the theatrical canon, when there's proof that this work and Shange's work is part of classical theater, because she is, and we'll get into that in her bio, but like should be in classical theater because she's so successful, and her work clearly has an effect on the theater landscape as a whole. We have to make sure that we recognize that when we're talking about classic texts as well. Having this play on the list keeps us accountable for what we choose and what we put on the list and what we choose to highlight as well.
Absolutely. And there's this like, especially with like classic theater, there's this sort of stereotype of like what we think we are talking about when we talk about classical theater is something, and we've talked about this so much, but the stereotype of classic theater in the American canon is like this very white, very European, very English language centric thing, but in terms of like theatrical structure is something that is also very naturalistic, is this sort of like traditional 5-act structure. And we think of that as like That is what classical theater is.
Yeah.
As if the idea of like any sort of other types of performance or theatrical storytelling, anything like more impressionistic or expressionistic or absurdist or anything like that, like didn't exist before.
Right.
When it, like actually theatrical and performance traditions that have existed outside of that sort of naturalistic 5-act Aristotelian tragedy type structure for as long as people have been doing performances, and actually the conflation of that naturalistic 5-act structure with great classics is a falsehood. Like that's very myopic.
Yeah.
Which is also why I think, we were really excited to put this play on the list, because like you said, it is sort of a disruption of that traditional quote unquote classic structure, but it absolutely is a great classic and should be treated as a great classic in the way that it should be studied, it should be performed. It's an incredible piece of art, and she is an incredible playwright. And also, like, for people who are like, oh, I don't understand this type of theater, it's not accessible, I think it really is. I think it's just people are sometimes alienated by stuff that is different because they haven't seen it before. But
yeah,
I would encourage anybody to go see a Shange play if you ever have the chance, because it is not a night of theater that you will forget.
Agreed.
History.
Tell us about this incredible playwright.
I will. Before I go into her life and the bio, I do want to thank Sierra Rosetta for the dramaturgy, and also trigger warning that we'll be talking about suicide, sexual assault, and mental health throughout this episode. So just take care of yourselves. Okay, so Ntozake Shange was born on October 18th, 1948, as Paulette Linda Williams in Trenton, New Jersey. And she died recently in Bowie, Maryland, October 27th in 2018, surrounded by family. Until the age of 8, Shange lived in a racially diverse community among well-educated upper middle-class Black and white families. So she lived in an environment that felt diverse, wholesome, not affected, but like limited the effects of racism in America. At a young age, was not exposed to that. She was socialized with prominent musicians and performers, included Dizzy Gillespie, Chuck Berry, Charlie Parker, Miles Davis, and Josephine Baker, who were all friends of her parents, Paul and Eloise Williams.
Okay, flex.
I know, right? I know. Could you imagine just growing up around all of these amazing people? Like,
no, I can't.
Yeah, I think there's a reason why her text. Yeah, there's a reason why there's music, dancing, and amazing, beautiful poetry in her plays. Right? Which I think is a testament to her parents, who were eager to support their daughter in her artistic education. They really put an emphasis on artistry at an early age.
Hell yeah.
Because art matters.
Art matters.
Despite not being in the industry themselves, her father was a surgeon and her mother was an educator and psychiatric social worker. They became friends with prominent poets and musicians for the sake of their daughters, plural. Shange's sister, known as Ifa Bayesa, also went on to be a successful playwright and won an Edgar Award in 2009 for her play The Ballad of Emmett Till. So it really helped. It clearly really supported their artistry. In 1956, the Williams family moved out of New Jersey and into a racially segregated St. Louis, Missouri, which is the setting of Spell Number 7. And they remained there for 5 years until moving back to New Jersey after her father completed his time studying with Homer G. Phillips Hospital.
Is that why they moved there, for his work?
For his residency fellowship or something. I'm watching Grey's Anatomy, so I know a lot about education of a surgeon. 5 years feels like a residency. So I'm assuming he went to do his residency. There. Yeah. So she was 8, obviously, and then left. What's 8 plus 5? 13. So which is a pretty defining time in a child's development. I feel like I moved when I was like 9 to a different country, and I know that really affected my growth. So going through puberty, all that stuff, there's a lot of things that are affecting you. So changing from a very wholesome environment to a racially segregated St. Louis, Missouri couldn't have been fun. And we're about to talk about that. The Brown versus Board of Education Supreme Court ruling was still fresh when Shange was transferred to Dewey Elementary School in St. Louis to participate in the school's gifted program. She was one of the first Black students at that school, which obviously led to her experiencing a lot of racial harassment and just racism as a whole. These experiences would go on to heavily influence her work, such as Spell Number 7 in St. Louis. Shange was exposed to music, dance, art, literature, poetry, and opera, again, due to the encouragement of her parents and her growing passion for poetry.
That's pretty striking also for a kid that young to be into poetry, honestly.
Yeah.
Like that, I feel like that's pretty unusual.
I agree. I think that speaks to her precociousness, I want to say. You know, when you set up a good support system for your child, they're able to figure out what emboldens them or like fires their passion. And especially if you're going through a lot of change, like having kind of that constant helps you make sense of the world. And I'm wondering if art was that for her.
Yeah, I mean, for many of us, the arts were a safe space or a place to, you know, gain back some power over our identities, especially when you're at that age and it can feel like the world is sort of, so much of the world is like telling you who you are. And It's nice to have a place to sort of self-express and explore stuff and process things. So the arts are important, folks.
Yeah, for sure. Especially when you said like the world tries to tell us who we are, I can imagine as a young Black woman in a racially segregated school and neighborhood, the world is 100% beating you down from all sides. And to be able to come home to that environment and being able to express yourself through the arts, I feel like probably helped. Well, let's hope.
Yeah. To quickly sidebar for a second, just like returning to Spell Number 7, of like, we've said this a little bit, but I just want to like really highlight one of the things that I love so much about this play also is that it really, really centers Black women.
Yes.
And like it's about, you know, a lot of different characters of different gender identities, but it's like really about Black women in the arts and taking that power back and centering those experiences, which feels very tied to just what we were talking about now about, you know, the arts being a space for that. So just wanted to underline that.
Yeah, no, great sidebar. It's true. At 13, Shange returned to New Jersey with her family, more aware of the inequities faced by Black people, most specifically American Black women. So that sidebar was a perfect segue into this.
Hey!
She then went to Barnard University, which is an all-women's school affiliated with Columbia University in New York, right here, where she pursued a degree in American Studies. Her college years were marked by intense personal turmoil. She suffered with mental health issues and just, I think, growing up and switching that environment and really being exposed to that at a young age affected her. And so she was struggling to make sense of the world that she lived in. And as her identity is the identity of Paulette Williams, her birth name, came undone, she traveled to Africa on a soul-searching trip and emerged Ntozake Shange. Okay, so I took a lot of time learning how to say this, so I'm going to get ready. In the South African Xhosa language, Ntozake means she who has her own things. And Shange means one who walks, lives with lions in Zulu, which is a beautiful name.
What a powerful name, too.
What a powerful name. So Shange's pain and mental health issues during her college year would set the stage later for her creative masterpiece. So she really went on a journey to find herself, which I think speaks to, unfortunately, her success. It sucks that like that has to come from personal pain. Most of the time it's the case, but yeah. She was truly struggling. I don't know that I've stressed this point enough. She was having a hard time during her young adult life and repeatedly attempted suicide. Her diagnosis was unclear. There are different sources that say different things. It doesn't matter. What matters was that she was in pain. Despite the upheaval in her personal life, Shange persevered and managed to graduate cum laude with honors from Barnard University with a degree in American Studies. She later went on to receive a master's in American Studies from the University of Southern California in 1973. I think that the emphasis on American Studies is telling. That speaks to someone who knows that they understand their artistry and their craft, and they're looking for their topic, right? To be really clear about what they're talking about within their craft. That's what that said to me. She understands how to write, but now she needs to understand what she's writing about. This feels like someone who really wants to make sure that they are being accurate in their storytelling. Shange had one daughter, Savannah Shange, with the painter MacArthur Binion, her second husband. Her first marriage to David Murray, the American saxophone player, also ended in divorce. She's most noted for her plays, poetry, and fiction, which covered topics such as feminism, race, and sexual anger. Her most popular works are Betsy Brown, Daddy Says, Ellington Was Not a Street, and For Colored Girls Who Have Considered Suicide When the Rainbow Is Enough. She taught humanities, women's studies, and Afro-American studies at California colleges throughout her adult life and continued to write for the stage and novels. You probably have heard of For Colored Girls Who Have Considered Suicide When the Rainbow Is Enough. I just recently bought the play, which quickly brought her fame during its 7-month off-Broadway run in New York and then its 2-year Broadway run. The play became an instant classic in the canon of Black theater and is still performed by historic and contemporary Black theater organizations alike. In 2010, it was adapted into the feature film titled For Colored Girls.
There was a revival in New York of this play. It was 2022. There was a revival at Lincoln Center, and I remember this because there's this writer that I love called Ayanna Prescott, and she led this initiative where people were donating tickets for audience members who might not otherwise be able to afford to see it, because they were also trying to extend the run, make a political point of this is the kind of work that we want to be upholding and supporting. So there was this whole it was really beautiful, actually. There was massive movement online to save this play from closing, and people were just donating the cost of tickets, and so many people ended up seeing this play who had never been to Broadway before, had never seen a play before, and it was this really, really beautiful community engagement initiative. So shout out to Ayanna Prescott for leading that.
I love that. That. It truly speaks to just the power of community, which I think is also part of her work. Underlines how important that is, I think, in theater. And I think if you're listening to this episode, whenever you're listening to it, hopefully we'll have moved out of some of the strife that's going on in the theater world. But I think we just need to remember when we're creating about what this is about, which is about community. And that's how, this is telling that works. Listening to your community, to the people who are coming to see your shows, is important. Just remember that as we are producing work in the coming years, to listen to what the needs are and what the stories that we want to be telling are.
Yeah.
Another popular work of hers is her adaptation of Bertolt Brecht's Mother Courage, that features a Black family in the time of the American Civil War. Shange created a number of other theater works that employed poetry, dance, and music that are known as choreopoems, which, as we said, spell number 7 is considered a choreopoem. Her passing left a huge hole in the theater community and her work in the industry, as well as the arts as a whole, and is considered a lasting legacy for Black theater artists and storytelling.
Didn't know about the Mother Courage thing. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Do you know where that was performed?
Yeah, at the Public in 1980.
Interesting. When we were talking about this a little bit when we chose this play and Ntozake Shange for the list this year, of just she's somebody who obviously has existed in the theatrical canon and has been celebrated and studied and had some success during her lifetime, but also feels ripe for the revival treatment. There was a thing that happened with Alice Childress a couple of years ago where all of a sudden her plays were getting produced everywhere because they felt so timely and people were just rediscovering her. It just really feels like Shange deserves that sort of treatment as well, because For Color Girls is a really beautiful play and it gets revived and produced here and there, but would love to see more of Shange's canon getting produced and studied and celebrated, and because she really had just such a unique and specific and beautiful voice, and her work has made such an impact on so many people. Would just love to see her get her time in the sun, even more so.
I fully agree. I think there's this thing with writers of color in which in the greater Western theater landscape there's a kind of a moment of we have one artist from that particular demographic that we keep reusing, so that, you know, we're honoring Black people this way, or we're honoring Japanese people in this way. But it's like there's so much more to that. I'm just thinking mostly of Lorraine Hansberry, who there's a reason why Raisin in the Sun is one of the most produced plays, but there is so many other playwrights who are writing either at the same time as her or who have been writing since that also deserve that same treatment. And fully seconding that of let's make sure that we're recognizing as many people as we can. There's room, you know, there's room for that in theater right now. People are getting tired of seeing the same thing. I've talked to so many people and it's like, okay, we're done with seeing the 50 bajillionth iteration of Hamlet, right? Let's do something else. And then that makes Hamlet fresher. It's like if you've had a break from Hamlet for 10 years and then someone's like, oh, you know what we haven't done in a while? Hamlet. That makes it more exciting. But if you're doing Hamlet 5 times a year.
Yeah. And also just like her writing is so rich. Shange's writing is so rich. There's so much, like, what a dream to get to work on something like this. Like, it is, like, it's the sort of theater that, like, would be such a joy and challenge for anybody involved in it artistically. Like, this is a designer's dream play. This is a choreographer's dream play. This is an actor's dream. This is a singer's dream. This is a director's dream. Like, you can do so much with this. And the play, like we've seen, has been like a vehicle for some really beautiful community initiatives. And like, that's really exciting for, like, you know, community organizing and those sort of like audience outreach initiatives. Like, this play could be like such a great tool for engagement and challenging artistry. It would be like great to study this play in academic situations because like the poetry is so rich and she's like there's so much to unpack here that you could, you know, spend so long just like talking about one monologue and like the literary allusions in it and the language and all of that like just like this play specifically, but like her canon as a whole, just like what a gift.
Agreed. There's we were talking about this with Kalina in our recording of Heaven Challenges. And you know, when we were talking about this list all together as curators, we were talking about this is the angry lady play of just like female anger is very present within this play. But in terms of producing, this is the year of like exciting productions, right? You can have, if you have the budget, not even if you don't, even if you don't have the budget, these plays are like a creator's dreams. It's just, there's so much to play with. I think of The Verge. I think of even Gagarin and I were talking about a new system of freedom, and they were talking about how you could do this in the black box and just be clowns. And I'm like, yes, all of these plays have this element of fun and play that you can just go wild with no matter your budget. And that's what makes theater exciting, is like these plays also leave room for the designers to really like leave their mark and have fun with. Part of the work that makes this super fun is like, ooh, now we do read a lot of not great plays, but when you get into the plays that are like, yes, like dipping into caramel, like I can just, ooh, I want to see this, I want to be in it.
This was the first play I think we confirmed this year, actually, if I remember it correctly. This was, I think we read it and we were like, so this one's on the list, right? Cool,
yes.
Which is always, just a nice experience.
Yeah, I think Gagarin was the first one who said this is a contender in their review. And then each of us read this and we're like, yep. Like no conversation. We're just like, yes, this makes sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Shange. Oh, man.
Just beautiful work.
And now, a monologue performed by Terra Chaney.
Unfortunately, the most beautiful man in the world is unavailable. That's what he told me. I saw him wandering about, said, well, this is one of a kind, and I might be able to help him out. So, alone and pretty and all this ganja and bodies melting, he danced with me and I could become that. A certain way to be held that's considered in advance, a way a thoughtful man would kiss a woman who could easily be offended but wasn't. Because of course the most beautiful man in the world knows exactly what to do with someone who knows that's who he is. These dreads falling through my dress so my nipples just stood up. These hands playing the guitar on my back, the lips somewhere falling between my neck and my forehead. Talking about Ocho Rios and how I really must go. Marcus Garvey could have come in the door and we would still be dancing that dance. The motion that has more to do with kinetic energy than shooting stars. More to do with the impossibility of all of this. And how it was already being too much. Our reasons failed. We tried to go away and be just together, aside from the silence that wept with greed. We didn't need anything but one another for tonight. But he is the most beautiful man in the world. It says he's unavailable. And this man whose eyes made me half naked and still and brazen was singing with me since we could not talk. We sang.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of This is a Classic, the Expand the Canon podcast. Learn more at expandthecanon.com.
And if you believe in the importance of expanding the canon, please consider giving us a 5-star review and subscribe to this podcast.
And then hit the share button and forward it along to a friend, colleague, or professor.
For info on what's up next with us, you can follow us on Instagram,
at Hedgepig Ensemble Theater,
on Facebook,
/Hedgepig Ensemble Theater,
or you can join our mailing list at hedgepigensemble.org.
You can also support this effort by donating at the link in the comments below.
Once again, I'm Skye Pagon.
And I'm Shannon Corenthin.
And we'll see you next time.
Bye.